Hi, everybody. I'm Brittany Lewis, a breaking news reporter here at Forbes. Joining me now is Matt Layton, Senior Vice President of Consumer Analytics at LegalShield. Matt, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me today.
The economy continues to be a top issue facing Americans, and this concern has really been compounded by the tariff whiplash we've seen in recent months. LegalShield found bankruptcy inquiries climbed to pandemic-era levels in Q1 this year. So to start the conversation, can you break down exactly what you found?
Sure, and what our index is, it's the Consumer Stress Legal Index, and we've really been running this since January of 2002. On average, we field 150,000 requests for legal services per month. That's over 35 million inquiries since 2002. And what's interesting is that this isn't a survey or a sentiment analysis. This is hard data. We're measuring the volume and frequency of folks requesting legal services for issues they're experiencing every single day, right? I like to say folks don't call a lawyer for a good time. They call because they have an issue or they're concerned about a potential issue. And this is what makes this data so powerful. And you're 100% right. What we've seen really over the course of Q1 2025 is an increase in requests for legal services for bankruptcy related issues, the highest since we've seen pre-pandemic, that Q1 of 2020.
When you see people calling regarding bankruptcy related issues and you're seeing that rise, what is that usually a harbinger to?
So really what our data says, bankruptcy is normally kind of an end game in a process. Our data is also showing increased requests for legal services for items like billing disputes and collections. We kind of say that's a leading indicator of maybe a future call on bankruptcies. And really what's extremely important about our bankruptcy index in our data throughout the entire history, it's been a 2-quarter leading indicator of bankruptcy filings as reported by the U.S. government. That's why not only is it kind of a warning sign now that those bankruptcy requests for services are increasing, we believe that they are going to continue increasing for the foreseeable future.
And you mentioned before that you believe that a summer surge is next. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Sure, and that's that 2-quarter leading indicator that we're talking about, that our data has been predictive of future bankruptcy filings. And again, we're measuring everyday people calling a lawyer, asking about bankruptcy related issues, right? I'm having trouble paying my bills. Can I skip this payment? What's going to happen? There's not enough money at the end of the month, right? So then they start beginning to get into these bankruptcy related questions when, all other options have been exhausted.
So you're seeing bankruptcy related questions rise, and this comes at the same time that LegalShield found 3 consecutive quarters of elevated consumer stress. Talk to us about that as well.
Sure. So our consumer stress index is really the headline index, and it's composed of 3 different sub-indices: the bankruptcy index, foreclosure index, and a consumer finance index that then all roll up into the overall consumer stress index. And we've seen, sustained small increases over the last several quarters, increases in each of those, which continues to increase in the stress levels.
So you've been gathering this data, LegalShield has, since 2002. Historically, how do you see these types of levels go down? What needs to happen?
There needs to be relief at the, American household level, right? Again, we've been looking at this since January 2002, over 35 million requests for legal assistance over that time has went into this index. And really what this says, when stress rises, it's because that, household economic condition is deteriorating.
Based on what you found then, to that point, what is the state of the average American household's finances?
Really what we're seeing when we talk to our lawyers about what our members are asking about, it's that the American household, the financial condition, they're concerned right now, right? As prices continue to increase, interest rates stay high, the accumulation of inflation over the last several years, it's taking a bite out of that household budget, and folks are asking the hard questions. What can I afford to purchase? What bills can I afford to pay, and kind of what are some of my options if and when I'm not able to pay some of my bills. So, I would say the condition of the household today is, it's stress isn't rising greatly, but it's not going down. Folks are concerned right now. Luckily, they're reaching out and asking questions and preparing for the future.
This seems to that point like a canary in the coal mine moment of people are preparing, people are concerned, people are asking questions. What struck me about what you said earlier is that you've been collecting data since 2002. And as we know, we went through the Great Recession in 2008, 2009. Is what you're seeing right now, is that anywhere pre-2008 levels? I mean, what does that look like?
Yeah, no, we're certainly not up to the Great Recession or the housing crisis levels that we've seen in those years. But what we are seeing is that we're at and rising now above the levels we saw pre-pandemic. So during the pandemic, a lot of our stress levels lowered because of a lot of the government intervention and bill paying and rent and stuff like that. But now each of our stress level indices are rising above where we were pre-pandemic, and again, continuing to rise.
And what are you finding out about the housing market specifically? Because I know you have some data on that. Do Americans think that right now is a good time to buy? What does that look like?
Sure. So our housing index, we have a housing sales index and a housing construction index, and both of those are slowly ticking down. As you can imagine, at the start of the increase in the interest rate, we saw a precipitous drop in both of those, the housing sales and the housing construction index, and we're not seeing, any relief or any change there. Both indices continue to slowly tick down. And again, we believe that's because of that higher level economic stress that overall index is showing. Folks are having a hard time making that decision on upgrading a house or, looking to, maybe I can't afford a higher house payment right now, so let's put off that house purchase.
This is all coming at a time, as we said at the top of the conversation, that a tariff plan was rolled out. Tariffs are expected to raise prices and inflation rates and shrink consumer spending and disposable income. Based on what you're seeing, do you think tariffs are really going to exacerbate these concerns?
Well, and I think you just said it. If increasing the tariffs continue to increase prices, hold interest rates or even increase interest rates, anything that takes a bigger bite out of the average American's household budget is going to exacerbate the stress and increase the stress. So if tariffs do in fact increase prices, we're going to see a continued increase in the financial stress of the American household.
The tariff plan was touted to help small businesses, help the everyday American. The Trump administration said Wall Street has had its turn. It is now Main Street's turn. Based on what LegalShield has found, do you think that's the case?
Well, really, what our data shows is how the everyday American and how the small businesses are performing and faring in the economic conditions today. And I think even the Trump administration mentioned that there may be some upfront pain and all of the benefits are going to come later. Our index doesn't look far enough out to later to answer that question. All I can say is that if prices rise today due to tariffs, we will see an increase in the stress.
Matt, it's clear based on these numbers here that Americans are continuing to be concerned about their finances and the economy at large. What specifically are you looking out for next?
Well, again, we're watching how the American consumers is reacting to the, almost daily changes and fluctuations in the economic conditions at the micro level. Again, we're looking kind of at that micro level. What's happened at the macro level? Does that filter down to the individual, and how do they respond? And again, as long as prices and interest rates continue to stay high, we expect that financial stress to continue to rise, right? Because folks have been dealing with this for quite a while now, and a lot of people are coming. It's really at the end of their rope. That's why we see some of these bankruptcy numbers going up. Is like, this is my last option.
Matt, Leighton, I really appreciate the conversation today. I appreciate the data. And when you have numbers for Q2, I would love to break them down and dissect them with you. Thanks for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.